The biggest move so far this week was not a free agency acquisition. The biggest move by far, Big Cat, was the trade that happened on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Let me just say this, folks. If you're going to make big moves for NFL teams, do it during working hours, because that's when people are looking for things to do other than work, and they tend to congregate at websites that cover sports they like to follow. They spend a lot more time at profootballtalk.com if they're at work. So make these moves between the hours of 9 and 5 Eastern, please. The Odell Beckham Jr. trade came at 8 p.m. on Tuesday night Eastern time. That blew up the NFL world. That turned Cleveland upside down. The Giants are upside down. And we're going to talk for most of this segment about what this means for the Browns. What was your first reaction Tuesday night when you saw that OBJ had been traded?
I was shocked, and I'll agree with you. During, 9 to 5 hours would be preferred. I was actually in the middle of taping a podcast. I was shocked to hear it. I think we all thought that it was a possibility because Jay Glazer, and credit to him, he put this out into the universe about a month ago. But I was shocked that it happened, and it seemed to happen almost like that. Usually when these kind of trades happen, you hear the rumors, you hear the mumbles. We heard that from Jay Glazer a month ago, but then it didn't it feel like it just came out of nowhere? Boom, he's traded. We didn't hear that there were talks going on or anything like that. And I also thought it was crazy because the Giants should have gotten more. They've misplayed every single hand they've had in the last year and a half. And the Browns are going to be one of the most exciting teams in the NFL next year.
There were vague rumors coming out of Cleveland last week, and eventually Tony Grossi of ESPN Cleveland said the rumor is Odell Beckham Jr. to the Browns for guard Kevin Zeitler plus more compensation for the Giants. When they did a deal last Friday that sent Zeitler to the Giants for defensive end Olivier Vernon, people assumed, okay, that's it. Maybe they talked about Beckham, but they couldn't work it out. Trade not happening, and that's what made it such a surprise when it did happen, because the belief had been that the ship had sailed. Now, there had been a lingering thought that the 49ers would try to get Beckham. I don't know if they were serious players in the final analysis, but that notion that Beckham was available was just kind of hanging around, even though the Giants denied it. And to their credit, the Browns saw the opening. They put together enough to get the Giants to not say no. They get the deal done. And now the Browns have, when you consider the moves they've made this offseason, and when you consider everything they did last year, what a transformation of the team. But you look defensively, they've got Myles Garrett. They've got Denzel Ward. They've added Sheldon Richardson. You throw it over to the offensive side of the ball, where they added Jarvis Landry last year. Baker Mayfield, the first overall pick in the draft. Nick Chubb, who was great as a rookie and didn't nearly get to play as much as he should have. You've got Kareem Hunt, who's been added recently, who at some point will presumably be cleared to play again in the NFL. And you throw Odell Beckham Jr. on top of it. This is a Browns team that instantly becomes a team that will be carrying heavy expectations. Team to beat in the AFC North is going to be the belief, although there are some people who say it's still the Steelers. I don't know how you make that argument with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell out the door. Where do we see the Browns fitting? Let's start. We'll broaden it to the AFC generally, but let's just start in the division. Between the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Steelers, where do you think the Browns fit right now?
I mean, I would probably, sitting here right now, pick them to win the AFC North, which might sound crazy. But I do think that, the way they finished last season, and I want to go back to that real quick. This all comes back to Baker Mayfield. And this is why you should, if you have a guy who you think is the future of your franchise, you should start him. Hugh Jackson didn't start him. He had to wait till Tyrod Taylor was injured. But John Dorsey makes this move because of the way Baker Mayfield played last year. He says, this is the guy. We know that we have the guy. Let's go start putting the pieces around him. Let's open this championship window in Cleveland, and it all goes back to Baker Mayfield. But, I mean, if we're going to start in the AFC North, the Bengals haven't done much. The Ravens, you could say, probably net got a little bit worse maybe because they had a bunch of guys leave, and also we don't know Lamar Jackson having that playoff game against the Chargers after that was the first team to see him twice. He is now going to play a whole season next year where everyone gets to see him, gets the tape on him. All his AFC North teams will see him for 2 times. So I'll throw those guys to the side. And then the Steelers, you don't know what to make for the Steelers because James Conner was just, he wasn't Le'Veon Bell, but he was 85% of Le'Veon Bell. And Juju Smith-Schuster is still fantastic. And the Steelers seem to be able to get a wide receiver no matter what. I mean, you look at the guys they've drafted. It's unbelievable what they've done at that position. So I will tentatively say the Browns would be my pick right now, but I still think, like you said, the Steelers will have something to say about that.
Yeah, I think it does come down to the Browns or the Steelers. And the thing about the Steelers, whenever the expectations are high, the Steelers find a way to not live up to them. But when the expectations are low, that's when the Steelers are dangerous. And there's going to be a lot of upset people in that organization, in that locker room, wanting to go out and prove that they can still get it done. And to the extent that Antonio Brown was creating a distraction, a disruption, there may be some happiness that he's out of the picture, although you hear different reports on whether or not he really was a major distraction. If Ben Roethlisberger was the problem, well, he's still there. But you know what? He still plays at a very high level. And I think to the extent that they're trying to get the most out of the final years of Ben Roethlisberger's career, Mike Tomlin finally feeling some accountability and pressure, maybe that makes him better at his job. I think the Steelers could be a sneaky choice. I know from so many years where I've seen the Steelers be overlooked and disregarded, that seems to be the type of year when the Steelers find a way to rally and surprise everyone and remind everyone that they're still the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And look, anytime you get rid of Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, your team gets worse on the field. I don't think anyone would argue differently. But I think there is an argument to be made about addition by subtraction, and that's the fact that this last year has been absolutely insane in Pittsburgh. The Le'Veon Bell situation went right into the Antonio Brown situation. It was pretty clear when you heard offensive linemen call out Le'Veon Bell early in the year that locker room has a lot of issues, and now they probably have less issues. Now, I don't think Big Ben is like the world's best leader, but if you take away a couple of the issues, maybe you can almost dumb it down in a situation where, hey, this is what we got, and we got to make do with what we have. And I think the Steelers might have that addition by subtraction on the locker room side. Obviously, the talent level will not be the same.
Yeah, Jesse James, who was the starting tight end before the 2018 season, he was supplanted by Vance McDonald last year. He signed with the Lions this week, and he said at his introductory press conference he was glad to get away from the drama in Pittsburgh. He talked about the Antonio Brown trade. He said it had to happen because things were out of control by the end of the season. So if that perception is accurate, and this is a guy who was in the building for 4 years in Pittsburgh, maybe the Steelers do get better with the decision to move on from Antonio Brown. I think the key is this, because we know Juju Smith-Schuster can get it done. So he steps into the Antonio Brown role. Who will become Juju Smith-Schuster? Will it be James Washington, who was disappointing last year as a rookie? But how many chances is he going to get with Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster there? Can they get something out of Dante Moncrief, who they added this week? So these are things to be determined. But I think the biggest threat for the Browns in the division will be the Steelers, and it won't surprise me if the Steelers win the division. And I think as we settle into the idea that the Browns have all these stars, there's inevitably going to be a backlash because people are going to get sick of hearing about the Browns, and that's when people may turn to the Steelers and say, hey, maybe the Steelers can get this done. But regardless, let's say both teams make it to the postseason. What do we see the Browns doing when it's time to compete with other great teams in the conference? Because there are plenty of great teams in the conference. You got the Chiefs. You got the Chargers. The teams in the AFC South are no slouches, especially now that Nick Foles is in Jacksonville. You've got the Patriots. They're still the Patriots. And, we're talking about all these other teams. At the end of the day, the Patriots are still the Patriots. Can the Browns compete with these teams not in their division?
Why not? Why not? I'm not really a believer in, the too soon thing. I think last year was their step forward year, and you saw, why wouldn't they be in a situation, the end of last year, the best thing that could have happened for the Browns was that very slim, 1,000,000-to-1 shot that they could make the playoffs, and they got into games that felt like a playoff atmosphere. They were in that Ravens game at the end of the season. They felt like they were playing big games in December, and I think that was such an important piece to putting this whole thing together. I think the biggest question is going to be Freddie Kitchens. What type of head coach is he? Because we've heard it many, many times. When you go from being a coordinator who doesn't have to talk to the media, that doesn't have to deal with the team's problems overall, to being a head coach, it's a big leap. And personality matters, and obviously it's great that Baker Mayfield clearly wanted him to be the head coach, so you already have that relationship intact and strong. But that is the biggest question mark to me. I'm not worried about Baker Mayfield. I'm not worried about the offense. I'm not worried about the defense. I'm worried about a coach who hasn't been there, done that, when they're going to a season with expectations through the roof in a city that desperately wants a winner.
And along with the perception that Freddie Kitchens was handpicked for the job because that's the guy Baker Mayfield wanted. You know, one of my concerns for the Browns is, will Baker Mayfield become too big for the team? And in a roundabout way, there's a little wisdom to bringing Odell Beckham Jr. into the fold, because now it's not the Baker Mayfield show. Yes, he's the guy, but OBJ is there too. And he's going to be drawing a lot of attention, a lot of fame. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like it's Baker Mayfield plus this supporting cast. It feels like the supporting cast is on more equal footing because the supporting cast is led by Odell Beckham Jr. And I think that's a very real factor. Not that Baker Mayfield is going to abuse the power that he has, but for a guy to come in 1 year and become the guy to fill that LeBron James void in Cleveland the way he did and basically decide who becomes the next head coach, that's the danger. As long as he has good intentions and does things the right way, it'll be fine. But I think Baker Mayfield, even with OBJ there, could end up with a lot of power. But what we saw last year was leadership, was performance, was production, and it was a guy that the Browns had been longing for a very long time. And I still think Mayfield's going to be special. But I agree with you. If Kitchens can't get it done, let me tell you this, though, Big Cat. If Kitchens can't get it done, they'll be lining up out the door to coach the Browns the next time that job's open.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That was a nice cross-sport reference there. I didn't even know you watched the NBA. I didn't know you knew who LeBron James was.
I don't.
But
I barely do.
But Baker Mayfield, he's a force of personality. Like, he is a franchise-changing guy. And I see what you're saying when you have the perception that it was basically his coaching search. Like, Baker Mayfield did the coaching search. He picked the guy. But look at a place like Green Bay, where they have not empowered Aaron Rodgers, and that intention starts there when you go the opposite direction. So if I have a guy like Baker Mayfield, who I think is going to be a franchise-defining guy, who not only is a good quarterback, but a personality where he can basically change, like, the last 20 years of Cleveland Brown football, I'm going to give him as much power as he wants, honestly. Like, why is that a bad thing? Players have power. We learned it this offseason. Antonio Brown had power over the Steelers, and he took it without, you know what I mean? Like, he just took it away from them. Baker Mayfield should be given as much power as he wants because he's that type of guy.
And here's where I mentioned something that's going to piss everyone off in Cleveland, because I talked about this with WEEI during Super Bowl week, laying out the future for Baker Mayfield if there really is dysfunction in the ownership ranks. This was right on the heels of the Seth Wickersham article that talked about all the dysfunction from the top of the organization on down over the past several years. And we talk about the power that players now have. You know, if Baker Mayfield ever decides that it's just not going to work here because of ownership, because of dysfunction. And let's say that they've got this grand experiment now with Odell Beckham Jr. And if it blows up and if it doesn't work, you talk about players having power. The moment Baker Mayfield wakes up and says, I want out of Cleveland, that's going to be one hell of a day. And Browns fans, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they've got the ingredients in place to be highly competitive and contend. You give the guy that much power, he may decide someday he's going to use that power to get himself to another location. And now they're throwing shoes at the TV. They're throwing their breakfast at the TV in Northeast Ohio.
Boo this man. Boo this man. You told me that I jinxed Baker Mayfield. You said I jinxed Baker Mayfield, saying hopefully he doesn't get injured, or if he gets injured. You just said he's basically leaving as a free agent.
I did not say that. I said if it doesn't work out and there's dysfunction at the top of the organization and players have power now more so than ever, maybe that's the next guy to use his power.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.